Hi, I'm Jennifer Woosley Saylor. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor and the kid of a cop. And this is the podcast When the Call Hits Home.
Hey everyone, it's Ashley Gethner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm also a child of a police officer.
Welcome back to When the Call Hits Home. I'm Jennifer Woosley, licensed professional clinical counselor.
And I'm Ashley Gethner, licensed clinical social worker.
And we are so excited to have you guys here today because we have two amazing guests. I'm going to just start gushing about how awesome you guys are. So why don't we start by you guys introducing yourselves and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, I'm Kathryn Severns Avery. I'm the founder and executive director of Restoration Ranch, Colorado, which is a 40-acre ranch in Colorado that provides recreation and respite opportunities for first responders and their family. And Ashley is one of our people who works with us. So Ashley, let's introduce you.
Hey everyone, I'm Ashley. I am a licensed professional counselor here in Colorado as well, and I help Restoration Ranch run the teen day camps.
Well, we want to hear all about Restoration Ranch. So tell us, can we start with maybe how the ranch got started? And then we'll go into a little bit more details about the ranch. Would that be okay?
Would love to share the story with you.
Okay, good.
So on December 4th of 2020, it's hard to remember back, but like we were in the middle of COVID and we were ready to go into another lockdown. My husband, Chris, and I were thinking, okay, we should go get groceries and kind of prepare for this. And we're in the middle of remodeling our home. So it's just an absolute catastrophe. So we get up, we have a really great morning together. I'm working on an 8-foot angel that's the centerpiece of my holiday lighting display. I'd won the neighborhood's first place 2 years, and Chris was like, go for a hat trick. So I'm highly competitive, so I did that.
Love it.
So yeah, and it's the 4th, so Advent has started, and I decided I was going to do a very gluttonous Advent activity, making a different kind of cookie every single day. And my husband and I are the part of the 1% of the population that really likes fruitcake. So I found a recipe for fruitcake cookies. But the store closest to us didn't have the citron, which is an essential ingredient. So I switched the order to be picked up at another grocery store about 2 miles away. So when Chris left that morning, I'm highly intuitive, and that little voice in my head went off and said, make sure you kiss him goodbye. So he's sitting at our island and I'm making my cookies and all that kind of stuff. And as he's getting ready to leave, that little voice says, go, so I went up and kissed him on the back of the neck and asked him, do you know how much I love you? And he said, yes. And he's okay, I'll be back soon. And he left and I never saw my husband again. At the same time, he was driving to the grocery store. 3 robbery suspects were robbing an Ulta beauty store, which is really weird. Why would you rob a beauty store? But they were boosting product to sell on the internet. And Chris was at a traffic light and the light turned green and he entered the intersection and he was T-boned by these 3 robbery suspects who were fleeing from police. It's important to note that the police had called off the chase because they were driving so dangerously. They were weaving in and out of traffic on a major thoroughfare. They were going through a residential community at almost 80 miles an hour. So when they blew through the intersection, they T-boned Chris, pushed our car 30 feet sideways down the street, which tells you how much momentum they had. And Chris bled out and died at the scene. At 3 minutes after 2, I'm in my garage and my body literally shook. That was the time of the impact.
Wow.
And I thought something just happened to Chris. And so, an hour goes by and I think, wow, what's he doing? He must be out Christmas shopping. And I've heard helicopters, I've heard sirens, and I'm kind of like, I don't understand this. What's going on, And so then it got to be 2 hours. And I was texting him and calling him thinking, you little booger, if you're out Christmas shopping, I am going to be really pissed.
Right.
And that voice in my head literally said, do not be angry with him. And that was when I figured out he's dead.
Wow.
So I called the non-emergency number of the Jeffcom 911 dispatch. They connected me to a person in the Lakewood, Colorado Police Department who asked me details about our car. And of course, I'm starting to panic at this point. I can remember that it's a silver Honda Accord, but I couldn't remember my license plate number, all those things that when you start to go into trauma, your brain doesn't work really well.
Right.
And then it got to be later and later. Now it's about 4 o'clock. So more than 2 hours have elapsed. It's starting to get dark. And my husband was a very large man. And I thought, oh my God, what if Chris had like a medical emergency? So I thought, let me go drive to where he was picking up the groceries. But by the grace of God, I took a different route and did not come across the crash scene. I also did not watch the news that night because if I had, I would have watched my husband die on live TV. They were running the surveillance footage from the convenience store at the corner on that intersection on the 5 o'clock news. So I didn't see that, but I called when I got to the grocery store, went up and down all the aisles in the parking lot. Our car wasn't there. I went over to where the grocery pickup was and asked, did my husband get our groceries? And they said, no, he never came. And then I really knew he wasn't going to come home.
Scary for you.
Yeah. So fast forward, that following year on April 26th would have been a milestone birthday for Chris. And I didn't want to spend it by myself. And because of the way I reacted to this tragedy, where everyone was asking me, are you going to sue the police department? And my response was, why on earth would I do that? They were just doing their job. And I was told you could get millions of dollars. And I'm like, that's not going to bring my husband back. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So it started an unusual relationship with the Lakewood, Colorado Police Department. And I called and talked to the person that I had spoken to the day that Chris was killed and said, hey, I'd like to celebrate Chris's birthday with your people and bring food from his favorite restaurants to roll call. And he was like, okay, sounds like a great idea. So this was in April. And 2 days before I called and said, where do I show up and what time? And he was like, oh my God, you're really going to do that? And I was like, yes. And he's like, oh, okay. So he told me where to be and I picked up the food and I attended roll call. And the day before, a 14-year-old boy had stabbed his mother more than 30 times, including through the skull.
Wow.
And the officer first on scene was in roll call talking in graphic and uncensored language about what had happened. EMS had been delayed in getting to the scene. This guy's, he's trying to arrest, or at least put the suspect in custody and to be able to help the mother. And he's talking and I'm like, why is he at work?
Yeah.
What's he doing here?
Yeah.
And I asked command staff and they said, well, he doesn't want to sit at home and think about this by himself. He may not want or need mental health counseling at this point, and there's no other place for him to go. And I thought, that is so wrong. And I decided I can do something about this. So I met with the FOP rep about I wanted to give them time at my house in Maine, my vacation home there that Chris and I had, because I had 3 trials with 3 defendants and I was going nowhere that summer. And I thought, well, let me give them time there. And I found out, well, you can't do it as a direct donation because that's a bribe and that would put you in jail. And I was like, let's not do that.
I like that they follow the rules. That's
I know.
good.
Yes,
A
exactly.
little bit
Yeah.
opposite of what we're trying to do here.
So when I met with the FOP rep, whose first response was, what do you want? And I was like, excuse me? And he's like, what do you want? I mean, now I understand how suspicious and skeptical law enforcement can be. But at the time, I was kind of taken aback by that. I said, I don't want anything. And he's like, you have to want something. And I said, okay, I want to say thank you. And then he looked at me like I had 5 heads. And so we talked about how to handle the vacation donation through FOP. And then I floated this other idea. I said, I want to create a place for first responders and their families to be able to go to just rest and relax. And he said, that doesn't exist. And I said, yeah, I know, I'm going to create it. And then he really thought I was a unicorn. So long story longer, I bought the ranch in March of the following year. We started renovations the next day. We were open by June.
Wow.
And then I hit this wall where no one was coming. And I thought, what the hell? I spent all this money buying and creating this sanctuary, and first responders they're not coming. What the heck? I founded the nonprofit. I had a board, and one of my board members was the former deputy public safety director for the state of Colorado. And I said, Beck, I need to talk to your old boss and figure out what's going on. And so I told him what I was doing. And I said, why aren't people coming? And he said, Kathryn, it's not that they don't want to. It's that we are stretched so thin, they don't have time to come.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And then you have this whole thing about, okay, what is this place? You know, is there going to be a timeshare pitch? Do I have to do something to earn a stay there? What's involved? So we're now 3 years old. Last year, we had more than 250 guests come to the ranch. They stay there at no cost.
Wow.
This year, we are on track to more than double that number. But during the building these relationships, 2 teenage daughters of law enforcement approached me one day, and they said they'd never met before. Their dads knew each other well, but they'd never met. And they said, we need to hang out with other people like us. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And they're like, well, she knows what a code word is. I'm like, I don't. What's a code word? And it's like, mom or dad drops that word, you know, to get up, get out, and go to a pre-designated point. I was like, oh my God. And then they talked about how they were held to different behavioral standards and academic standards than their peers in school because mom and dad were, you know, involved in law enforcement. And I was like, well, that's crazy. So I thought, let me find out how can I create a day camp to be able to do this. And I reached out to Tommy Adnalian, who's another therapist here in Colorado, who happened to be, I think he was your boss at the time, right, Ashley?
Supervisor.
Supervisor, excuse me. And when I floated the idea to Tommy, he's like, that doesn't exist. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm really good at like doing those things. So I reached out to Ashley, and she came to the ranch, and we talked, and we held our first camp. And we knew that it was life altering.
Yeah.
And so now we're continuing to do them. But again, we have competing priorities with scheduling and trying to get kids to come when they're like, okay, where is this place? Because we keep the location confidential. You know, what's it going to be like? Who's this person I'm going to be interacting with? So this year we got a little bit smarter. We had Ashley create some videos to explain the purpose of the camp, what they would do at the camp, that they won't be forced to do anything that they don't want to do. And we're hoping that those will help us market it. And as we continue to move forward, we will open up the opportunity to more and more people because we want these camps to grow and to be full. We
Right.
also want to be able to hold them in states other than Colorado.
Mhm.
So that's the
Yes.
great grand tour of why we're here today.
Well, Kathryn, I appreciate you sharing that. And again, you know, we spoke before, but I just have to say it again for our listeners. It's incredible, this story. And again, how you keep Chris alive and doing this restoration ranch. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Ashley, can you talk a little bit about maybe your side in terms of the kids camp, you know, ages, things that they do?
Yeah. So with the teen camp, we usually try to keep them around the same age. So usually it's at 12 to 18 years old. And we also realized early on that, you know, teens of law enforcement officers and teens of firefighters or teens of EMS or teens of first or dispatchers, right, are all unique, all have different
We are
experiences.
all
And
different.
so-
Yes.
Yes. And so wanting to really hone in on making sure that they feel seen and heard and that their experiences of what they go through, that they are not alone. I think that's like the biggest thing with the camp. Some of the overall themes that have been talked about of is just like wanting to protect their parent,
Yeah.
especially with there was a good chunk of time there, right, where it was society was very much, anti law enforcement, anti cop,
Absolutely.
anti first responder. And so there were great conversations of just those teens and how they handle those like things at school, how they handle friends, how to, maintain friends, knowing that they're saying like, like, I don't like the cops are bad, first responder, things like that. And just being able to like truly open up, bond with each other. Like Kathryn mentioned, that the goal of the camps is to literally that they're in control. I give them options of like, hey, I have a layout of what we can do today. At the same time, this isn't school. We're not holding to that. If you don't want to do something, we're not going to do it.
I
'Cause
love
I
that.
get like if you have a full week of school, I think the last thing you want to do, especially at a retreat, a beautiful 40-acre retreat, is it to feel like school. And so we get outside, we hike, there's a memory forest where teens, have painted things of memory of family members or loved ones or friends, and just being able to really build on memories and just again make them feel heard and seen and that they're not alone of having to go through, being a child or a teen of a first responder.
Absolutely. And so I do for myself, I have to thank you again too, Kathryn, for being so open and honest and sharing your story. And Jennifer and I have had this like awesome opportunity to talk with you both prior to this. And I don't know that there'll ever be a time when I hear that story that doesn't give me chills and it doesn't, so thank you so much for that. It impacts me every single time. And it's a learning opportunity, I think, for all of us. But I think even for when the call hits home, right, for this podcast and for our community, everything both of you guys have said, I feel like is already something that we have been digesting and, like ripping apart and all these things within this podcast itself. And so to have you guys come on here and to have this opportunity, that connection, it's something that literally warms my heart. And I hope like the When the Call Hits Home family feels that too. Like it's all encompassing at this moment, right? We have this educational piece and now we have other people who are really putting it together for us and are making a really safe space for these first responders and children of first responders to go and connect, which is absolutely incredible. So how would someone kind of get in contact with you guys, or is there a procedure that takes place for our listeners in terms of, I guess, learning more if they do want to come or things like that? How would they do that?
So all of the visits of the ranch are handled by sending a email to visit@restorationranchcolorado.com. And so if you let us know that you're interested in that, then we can put you on a mailing list and then send you information about when camps are going to be held. We're trying to do it at least 2 to 3 months in advance now so that people can plan around, oh, we need to schedule vacations. And, I think it's important to stress too that I'm a civilian. My husband was a civilian.
Yeah.
And to have been let into the first responder community in the way that I have been, I know is highly unusual. But one of the things that we do is we always keep our word. If we say we're going to do something, by God, we do it.
Yeah.
Because trust is so important to build. And it's also important. I'm part of Rotary, and we have a Rotary Youth Leadership Academy that happens. And I listened to kids who had been to RILA, and I'm new to Rotary. And I was like, what is RILA? I don't get this. And when the kids came and talked about it, it was like, oh, I get it. And then every one of them said, I was afraid to go because I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I thought, we need to raise the comfort level. And I think that I am a well-educated woman who is blissfully ignorant of the sacrifices that first responders and their families make. We just take for granted you're going to show up when we call 911. And truly, having gone through this experience, I now educate, advocate, and agitate on behalf of the first responder community because civilians are ignorant. And that needs to change. And it shouldn't change only after you experience a crime or a natural disaster or some kind of catastrophe.
Right.
We need to understand that if we don't take care of our first responders and if we don't support their families, there will be incredible consequences for generations. I'm not willing to let that happen because generational trauma is real, and
Mhm.
these families will be passing it on either knowingly or unknowingly if they don't choose to do something about it. So I think that it's not just the camps for kids. We really want to reach out to spouse groups as well because so many of them disbanded during COVID,
Yeah.
and there's not a great opportunity for them to get information on resources and where do we go for this and how do we do this? I personally am not qualified to provide that information, but we're very interested in reaching out and connecting with spouse groups to be able to say, what else can we do for your kids? You know, what do we need to be focusing on to help your families be strong and to survive? Because the divorce rate among particularly law enforcement, unbelievably high.
Very
And
happy.
then to learn that more first responders died from suicide last year than died in the line of duty is an unacceptable statistic. And that is something that we at Restoration Ranch, Colorado are committed to doing something about. You need to know that you are seen, you are heard, you are validated, and most importantly, you are appreciated.
Right.
Because I think the public in general does first responders a huge disservice when we label them as heroes, because that makes them feel that they have a standard of conduct that they have to uphold that is not sustainable. And we need to recognize first and foremost, they're human beings,
Mhm.
and we need to be there for them. And I realize there are not a lot of people like me out there. I want there to be more of them. So to be able to reach out and connect with your community, oh man, we would welcome that opportunity.
Well, and we will make sure to put that email in the links as
Yeah.
well for the show, because I think getting just the word out is so important, and recognizing, what kids need. They need some, like, this is what it's going to be like, and some security in bridging that for sure. And Kathryn, I just appreciate you are banging a drum, and you bang it loud, and it's one that needs to be banged. So thank you
This
for
is
saying
so
that.
silly, but I literally feel like when I listen to Kathryn talk, I'm like, oh my, I'm gonna run through a wall after this. Like my motivation, like it pumps me up. Like I get like, oh, right before a sporting event or something, I get that same feeling like, let's go, let's do this, because really at the end of the day, like we have to all work together to make these changes
Right.
happen and to find
Right.
other people who are so passionate like this too.
Yeah.
I don't know what Jennifer and I talk about this all the time. It just, after our last meeting, like it just ignites your soul. Like it's
Yeah.
there's no better feeling. And so it's
Mhm.
really an honor to have you guys both on here. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
talking about that, and especially I think, Kathryn, you own this to say I'm a bit of this like civilian outsider, and how to come in. And sometimes we need that, we need the prophet from the outside to come in and say, hey, this is the way and direction we need to go. I think it's so powerful. The Restoration Ranch too is this beautiful 40-acre place in nature, from a mental
Yes.
health perspective. And we talk about our nervous system and things like that. And just
Mhm.
more and more research is saying, like, be out in nature if you want to feel better. And I also just want to really applaud the fact that you guys protect the location. Like Ashley and I have no clue where this is in Colorado.
Mhm.
Like you guys do a
Mhm.
really great job, because it's important for our first responder families to feel safe,
Yes.
that they have a place to go to
Mhm.
restore and feel safe. So that's
Yes.
powerful as well.
Yeah, there's a funny story that goes along with that. So when the SWAT team came out to do a security assessment of the ranch, there was a house across the street, very high up on the mountain, that has an unobstructed view of the ranch. And they called it Sniper House. And I was like, what? And they were like, if we're ever going to have a threat, it's going to come from that house. And I was like, holy moly. Okay, I would never have thought about that. And also, I think it's funny because when they first came out, it's like, well, we need an armored bunker and we need to have bulletproof glass and we need to have a security gates and cameras. And now they're like, yeah, we're good. But back to the house, I kept on saying, if there's ever an opportunity to purchase that house, I'm going to buy it.
Aw.
So I lived at the ranch during the first year. We didn't have caretakers. We now have two remarkable people who run the ranch for me. So I can go out and do my educating, advocating, and agitating. But when they were moving into the ranch, so the house came on the market and I went and looked at it. And I was about to put an offer on it when we got a text from the realtor that said, I'm sorry, it's been sold. So I'm living at the ranch. And every time I look at this house, I keep on going, you are my house. You are my house. I was claiming it. So Kay and Krug move in September. And they knew that I had been looking for another property because I love living in the mountains. Although on days like today, when we're about to have another 2 feet of snow, I'm not really
Like, why am I here?
I mean, it's beautiful, but it's interesting. But anyway, they were moving in, and they're like, "Hey, we saw another house that's going on the market up the street. Maybe you want to go look at it." So I throw my dog Zula in the back of the car, and we go down the driveway, and we turn and we go past the driveway that goes up to Sniper House, and that voice in my head goes off again, and it goes, "It's back on the market." I did a U-turn. I went back to the ranch. And I texted my realtor and I said, did that place close? And she's like, yeah, 2 weeks ago. I said, will you check? And so like 5 minutes later, I get a text that just says OMG with about 500 exclamation points. She's like, it went back on the market yesterday. And I said, write
Stop
an
it.
offer.
Yes.
I had no idea how I was going to be able to purchase this house. I didn't have the funds. And so I'm like, okay, I'm a believer, it's like I am a force to be reckoned with. This will happen. And so we're talking about, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. And Oki looks at me and she goes, how old are you? And I said, I'm 67. And she's like, oh my God, you could qualify for a reverse purchase, for a reverse mortgage for purchase. So I was able to buy Sniper House. It gets better. The guy who had the contract before was a well-known meth manufacturer and meth distributor.
Oh,
This would
dear.
have been a
Oh.
mountaintop.
Okay.
Oh,
I was
dear.
like, yeah, thank you for keeping my first responder community safe, Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
I
my
mean, but that's
goodness.
how this process has unfolded. I've never been a part of anything that has had this much momentum, this much drive, this much purpose and passion behind it. So it excites me to see you guys get excited
Oh,
because it's
absolutely.
like, this needs to grow and it
does.
will.
Yeah.
And by doing a podcast like this and letting other people know, wow, let's do this. Let's make this happen. Let's figure out, because everybody talks about high performing first responders.
Yeah.
If they're traumatized, if they're tired, are they going to be able to make the best decisions on the job?
No.
Hell no. We know
Right.
that if you're tired,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like being drunk in terms of how your brain
Same.
is functioning.
Exactly.
So, and the other thing is like, you mentioned about being the outside person looking in. One of my first questions was, why on earth are there no 24-hour daycare facilities for first responder families?
Such a good point.
And it was like, what? Oh
Yeah.
my God. And municipalities won't tackle that because of liability issues. And I'm like, we're a nonprofit and we are beholden to no one other than our board of trustees.
Yeah.
So that is something that it's not an immediate goal that we can meet, but we are certainly letting people know. And particularly when you think about single parent
Oh, yes.
first responders,
Absolutely.
OMG, their stress level is off the charts because it's like, okay, now my call's extended by 5, 6, 8, 10 hours. I don't know. Who's going to take care of my kid? And the ripple effect throughout the family. Again, the general public doesn't know this or think about it. Ugh.
Well, And I love that you actually just brought this up, because I just heard recently too, through conversation, like natural conversation, that not only that, but that daycare part, the expense of it for these first responders. So I've
Yes.
had so many say, all I do is work and work overtime to just give it to my daycare, but yet I
Yeah.
have to work like it's a never-ending cycle that I can't get out of.
Correct.
So that
Correct.
financial piece too is huge.
Absolutely.
Well, and I just want to recognize that you guys so quickly moved into that bigger family aspect of who you're serving as first responders. I do think that there's some programs for first responders that are wonderful. But Ashley and I think, started this whole podcast just based on being kids of first responders. So I just really have to applaud that so much, is that you didn't just see the individual that's in the uniform, but you saw who's also with them in that. So I think that that's so powerful as well.
Yeah. And I think that that's really important because, again, there's backstory. So the guy that I talked with on the day that Chris was killed, his daughter was obviously the one that helped found the teen camps. Well, it was almost a year later that I learned that it was her birthday the day my husband was killed.
Oh.
So her dad missed her 13th birthday.
Oh.
And I thought, you'll never get that back. So on the second anniversary of Chris's passing, we had a gathering at my house and we sang her happy birthday. And I took her aside and I said, it made me so sad that your dad missed that very important day. And she was like, it's okay. And I said, no, it's not. I said, because you'll never get that back again. And what she said made me burst into tears. She said, Kathryn, if that hadn't happened, we never would have met you.
Oh, wow.
You're making me cry.
I was just about to say, I'm trying to look up. I'm doing the look up tactic.
Yeah. And again, the ripple effect of kindness in a world that is crazy and chaotic.
Right.
And that's what you deal with every single day because that's your job. We just need to remember that when you treat people the way you want to be treated, it helps them perform better. It helps them be better people. And that's what I want to spread. That's what I want my legacy to be, was because I knew if I took on the justice system, I would be old and bitter. And I mean, seriously.
Truth.
And so, and to give you an example, and again, I don't do victims advocacy work, but there's part of me that's like, I have a big mouth and I use it. So one of the things that people don't recognize is how our system victimizes victims over and over again.
Yeah.
Because remember, I have 3 defendants. They are already in community corrections and early parole hearings. So I literally have to go and testify every 2 to 3 months to keep them in jail for killing my husband. And I just got a notice from the Colorado Department of Corrections that the next hearing for the driver, who is directly responsible for my husband's death, is on December 4th, the day he was killed, and it cannot be changed.
Oh, my goodness.
That's unacceptable.
Okay.
That is unacceptable. And I lost my husband, and that's a trauma. Yeah, I get it. I was not raped. I didn't have somebody try to murder me.
Right.
And I know how hard it is for me to go and stand up and talk about what happened because they don't know.
Right.
Why this person should stay in jail, and to know that if I don't do that, there is a high probability he will be let go.
Right.
Or she will be let go, because one of the defendants was a woman. So
yeah,
that takes so much courage.
So
It
much
does.
courage.
And I'm glad that you're even bringing that to this conversation too, in terms of that. I think we're really lucky to have your big, beautiful mouth on this podcast, Kathryn.
So very.
I want to also just put a little bit of light and change course slightly, because this isn't the only thing you do, right, Kathryn? And I was wondering if you could
Right.
tell us a little bit about your work as an author, if that would be something
Yes.
you would mind sharing with us.
I would love to. I've written 7 books. 2 of them are on women's empowerment. Most of them are on crafts and design work, because that's what I do. But in 2016, my husband Chris retired, and we had spent more than a year creating a plan for what we were going to do in retirement. We purchased this house in Maine. I had renovated it. We thought it was going to be great. We'll go up, we'll spend time there. It'll be a fun thing to do. And the first 3 months of Chris's retirement, we fought more than we had fought in our entire marriage.
Oh, goodness.
That's an adjustment,
And-
though.
Yeah, because what happened, and again, this is particularly true for any profession, including first responders, where your identity is tied
Yep.
into what you do.
Say it.
And when you retire, you go from being that person to somebody who becomes invisible in our society.
Mhm.
And there are 76 million baby boomers that by 2030 will have turned 65, and they are all contemplating retirement. So I have written a book. I've created a life planner and a coaching system called Your Countdown to Retirement that walks you through the non-financial aspects of retirement planning. Because we had a plan, it didn't work. And we were in a tiny apartment in Augusta, which is 45 minutes away from our house. It was hot, it was cramped. We had way too much togetherness. I mean, we would go to the YMCA and practically attack people to have somebody else to talk to. I was like, oh my God, they think we're stalkers. Oh my God. And I just wasn't prepared for it. And I was not prepared for the depression that my husband went through, where he became absolutely immobilized and unable to function. And I thought, oh my God, this is awful. And then, of course, there's what we call hijacked retirement, where a life circumstance blows up your plan. So I'd always told Chris, I will never retire. That's just not my thing. I will work till the day I drop. But I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about these being our golden years. Yeah, not so much. And to know things like, most people trade 40 hours of work for 40 hours of television watching. That is a surefire way to die early.
Yep.
And first responders are particularly at risk. Their post-retirement survival rate pre-COVID was 5 years. It's now 18 months because the accumulated stress that has not been dealt with comes and bites you when you stop. And so not only do I have the Your Countdown to Retirement system, by the end of this year, the book specifically for law enforcement will be available. And I'm doing an additional book for fire and EMS, for dispatch, for frontline hospital workers, because nobody's talking about all of the things that you need to think about and that you need to start ideally 5 years before your last day of work. But I interviewed someone recently who only retired 2 months ago. And he said, I thought I was ready. But when you hand in your badge and your weapon and your, everything that goes along with that, and you realize when you walk out that door, you cannot walk back in. He said, it was a gut punch.
I bet.
Yeah.
Nobody's walking you through those steps. But
Not at all.
Yeah. So, thank you for letting me talk about Your Countdown to Retirement.
So one of the biggest things that I know I've shared before is like that topic for me. So doing trainings and stuff for different departments, that comes up often. I've been asked so many times, even just recently, like, what do we have for retired officers? What do we have?
Me.
Right. Well, and
Yes.
that's what's so
Yes.
exciting about this is that I feel terrible when I look at them and say, all I know, I work with a lot of retired officers, but I actually don't know of many things or anything at this moment. This was
Right.
prior to meeting you that
Right.
we have for this, right? And so
Mhm.
one thing I want to share is that we're going to definitely share those books, those pictures, all of that on our socials, on this podcast. We'll come back to it a million times.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
we will really share that because that hits a population that needs it
Mhm.
desperately. And
Yes.
I mean, I'm just so thankful having a dad who's retired, like to even know that that's out there, and that's something that
Right.
now I can share to my folks too that I'm working with. And I think that's
Yes.
incredible, and we will share that. And so I do want to ask, actually, I think this might be a great place to do it and maybe hit on that. Like, so retired officers are also involved in the ranch as well.
Correct. And so it was brought up, can retirees come to the ranch? Yes, of course you can. I mean, if there's one, so we have another program called Valor Vacations USA. So it started when I couldn't go to my house in Maine, and we ended up having a West Metro firefighting family go and spend a week there. It morphed into a program where you had to be nominated and then selected. And then we had gave away 11 vacations and only two people took them. And I
Oh,
once again was like, okay, what's going on here? And I was speaking at a trauma conference, and one of the people in the Q&A said, "Are you having trouble giving away your vacations?" And I said, "Yeah, we are. Can you explain that?" And he said, "I speak for every person in this room. If we were nominated and selected, there would be five other people we thought that deserved it more than we
mm,
did. We're not going to go." And I
wow.
went, "Oh, for pity's sakes." This sense of humbleness and modesty. I mean, I get it because that's part of your servant heart, which I have as well. But get over your bad selves. And so again, I also am a Reiki master. And one of my friends who's an officer was having some issues. And I said, "Would you like me to do distance Reiki on you?" And he goes, "No, do it on somebody who really needs it." I'm like,
Oh,
"You really need it."
oh,
I mean, it was
classic
just like,
first responders.
but that's part of the culture and the
Yeah.
self-care. If you don't do it, it's like, oh my gosh. And I just got, again, everything happens for a reason. I wasn't planning, didn't think I was going to drive out to Maine, but I did. And so I listened to books on tape in the car. And so I was listening to a book by Dr. Benjamin Hardy about future self psychology because I'm a future self planner, and psychology has changed from, okay, we've looked at therapy in the past from, okay, these things happened to you, and this is the meaning that you've attached to your story, and that's why you are now. Whereas now the shift is to, this is where you are now. Where do you want to go?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the future self coaching that I do, is helping you figure out with the end in mind, what are the steps that I need to be there? How do I have a happy and healthy retirement? Or it doesn't even have to be retirement, any phase of life. It's like when you become acquainted with who you want to be in the future, you can actually ask them questions about, "I'm stuck here. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you tell me what I need to do?" It's a game changer. Everything is different when you can incorporate that into the therapy or the coaching that you're doing. And that's really what I'm excited about. But when stability, consistency, and predictability are the three things that you stand on in law enforcement, there ain't nothing that's stable, predictable, or consistent about retirement.
Yeah.
So if you don't learn how to be resilient and to cope with change, which most law enforcement hate change, they want it to be the same. It should be the same it was today, tomorrow, yesterday, forever.
Always. Yep.
No, it doesn't work that way. So you have to teach them because they don't know, because it's not anything that they learn. So again, I feel like this is a phenomenal opportunity. And I'm starting a podcast, and I want all of
Yes.
you to be on the YCTR You Countdown to Retirement podcast, because you will bring unique perspectives that we need to talk about.
You know, what you really bring up, Kathryn, is often things I talk in session with clients about who are first responders, which is, they're so worried about making sure people can have a seat at the table. And, I think of my grandmother who was always making sure, like, do you have enough rolls or refill your milk? And we forget sometimes, like, we have a chair, a place at the table as well. And I really think that's what you're offering in Restoration Ranch in terms of saying, like, you can take a seat. That will help
Yes.
you. And how you serve others is taking that
Yes.
seat.
Because if we don't do it for ourselves, we can't do it for other people.
Mhm.
Again, the do as I say, not as I do model we know is an abysmal failure. So if you're
Mhm.
trying to teach your kids how to take care of themselves and you don't do it yourself, gee, that's going to work out real well for you.
Exactly.
So again, these are candid conversations, powerful conversations. And to be able, I mean, again, I get, most law enforcement people think vulnerability is a weakness. It is the biggest strength that you've got, but you need to know what to do with it and to recognize that being vulnerable, you're giving a voice to allow other people to be vulnerable too.
Mhm.
It's like we need to hold each other's hands through this process. This is not something that you do in isolation. And the law enforcement community in particular is so insular, they rarely have friends outside of the department. So if that disappears when you walk out that door, you're going to have problems.
I mean, I think
And
that's a
yeah,
powerful thing. And I think it comes back to this whole idea of being vulnerable. But, Ashley and Kathryn, you guys both know you have to have a place in order to be safe to do that.
right.
In order for somebody to be vulnerable, they have to feel safe. And
Yeah.
so again, just you guys creating this beautiful space and again, thinking about the families is so powerful.
And I want to piggyback off of that just a little bit, just as we are coming to a wrap up with things, is that I want to make it clear, right? So there's kind of a twofold here, and correct me if I'm wrong. So people can sign up, like the children of first responders, there are camps for that. So that's one thing that's happening, but also people can come and stay here as well.
Correct.
Okay.
So we offer a 2-night stay at no cost. If you're involved in a critical incident, we will extend the number of days that you can stay. We also make the branch available for team building activities, for like spouse groups that want to come up and have a mom stay out. And like, we'll even help you figure out the daycare because Kaylin, who's one of our ranch caretakers, is like the best grandma ever. I mean, she's amazing. She adores children. So we do make that available. Like I said, there is no hidden agenda. We have no religious or political affiliation. There is nothing that you have to do to earn this. This is my way of saying thank you to each and every person who was there for my husband when I could not be.
Literally the most inspirational thing I think I've ever.
I just got goosebumps. It's just beautiful. Well, and we will link everything in the show notes. I know we're getting ready to wrap up because of time. I could seriously continue to talk for the rest of the day, but I want to respect everybody's time.
And I do want to tell you, it's Restoration Ranch, Colorado. If you just put in Restoration Ranch in your Google search, you'll get an alcohol treatment facility in California. That is not us. And also, I need to clarify, we are not a mental health facility. We have no therapists on staff. Ashley comes in as an independent provider to facilitate our day camps, but this is strictly a place, think of it as like an Airbnb or Vrbo for your family to come and have fun and to bond. That's all we are.
Oh,
Yeah, if I can
like so much fun.
Yeah, and if I can just piggyback on that too, yeah, like the teen camps I'm a day counselor. I'm not a mental health counselor. I don't wear my mental health counselor hat when we do those. So it is just purely fun, bonding. Yeah.
You're the cruise director. Like
Yeah,
it's
you
way
are.
more fun than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys both so much. Like I said, we're going to put this on all of our platforms. Anything we get from you guys will automatically go to our social medias as well. We are always here to support you. This collaborative process, I think, if I can give our listeners a little bit of a heads up, we might have more coming for them, right? Us four have more coming for them. So that's something that's super exciting. But I can't thank you enough. Jennifer, I'll let you say your thank yous, but I can't thank you enough. I'm so inspired and I cannot wait to see really what comes of all of this.
Absolutely.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
guys.
Yes, thank you. And just never forget that we always end this way. If you guys have listened to us, you know what's coming your way, but never forget that when the call hits home, Jennifer and I are here for you. So thank you guys so much. And we're so excited for everything else to come.